welcome you to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your really fascinating, sometimes pretty spooky, and always, well, dense source material and turn it into the knowledge shortcut you need. We are so glad you've joined us.
Absolutely. And just right up front, we want to be clear. This deep dive is provided totally free of charge on all major platforms. It's purely for educational purposes.
That's right. Our mission today is, well, it's swift, but it's thorough. We want to synthesize some genuinely mind-bending concepts. We're talking memory, past lives, psychic projection, all straight from the historical record.
Exactly. Today, we are strapping in for a really detailed look at Session 10 of the Early Sessions Book 1 of Seth material. This was recorded way back on Friday, December 20, 1963 at 9 p.m.
And look, if you're curious about this stuff, and you probably will be after this, we really encourage you to study the Seth material books yourself and definitely visit the publisher, the New Awareness Network.
Yeah, you can find them online easily. It's https://sethcenter.com/that-early-sessions. They've got the books, the context, everything.
So this session, Session 10, it's phenomenal. The communicators, Jane Roberts and Robert Butts, or Joseph, as he's often called, they just hit Seth with this rapid-fire series of super personal, really specific questions.
It's like a laundry list, isn't it? Deep mysteries. You've got inexplicable phobias, you've got intricate family histories, and even the physics of manifesting a person, like literally out of pure thought.
Our job here is to synthesize these nuggets, connect the dots,
Yeah.
between maybe ancient trauma and present-day anxieties. We'll look at these family reincarnation patterns, the amazing specificity, like how consciousness records reality down to the doctor's fee, apparently.
Right. It's wild.
And maybe my favorite part, the startling psychic power of the subconscious, specifically how reality can, well, manifest around a single scoop of ice cream. It sounds funny, but it's profound.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this session just hammers home this core idea. Our present ego consciousness, what we think of as us right now, it's constantly navigating these vast, often turbulent waters of the subconscious.
Like an ocean underneath the surface.
Exactly. And in those waters, you've got old experiences, dormant creative powers, just sort of waiting for the right stimulus, or sometimes the wrong stimulus, And what's fascinating here is how Seth doesn't just give the what happened, but the how, the actual mechanism of psychic reality.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds dense. It's definitely personal to them, but as we'll see, it's got these threads that feel universally applicable.
Yeah.
Especially if you've ever had a feeling you just couldn't explain. So, yeah, let's get chilling.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so first up, we jump right into this mystery. It sets this fantastic, slightly unsettling tone for the whole session, really. The first question was about Jane's extreme nervousness, like paralyzing nervousness during this one event years before.
Right. They'd stopped at a dark, wooded, roadside picnic area in Texas.
Sounds innocent enough, right?
Yeah.
A pit stop.
Exactly. But the details matter. It was late summer or early fall, a very, very windy night. The trees were thrashing violently, darkness everywhere. They could hear a railroad nearby, kind of adding to that desolate feel.
Okay, creepy vibe established.
Definitely. And they had their dog, Misha, with them. But Jane's anxiety was just off the charts. Joseph said it actually infected him too, so they just grabbed a quick bite and drove on for hours before finding somewhere else. The feeling was that intense.
So the panic seems totally out of proportion, right?
Yeah.
It's a quick roadside meal, not something actually threatening happening in that moment.
Yeah.
Why this profound panic attack?
And that's the question. Seth's answer here is one of those classic past life connections that are just, well, essential if you want to understand this material.
Up it goes.
The core insight was immediate, stunningly simple, really. Quote, intuition, correct, but misplaced. Place reminiscent of another in another life when the wolves came. Dark and wooded, same time of year. Also had dog with you that other time.
Wow. Okay, so that's the aha moment. It wasn't Texas. It wasn't the dark road.
No. It was the combination. The wind, the woods, the darkness, maybe even the smell of the season. It all just echoed this ancient trauma.
And the source of the trauma.
A forest in Denmark.
Denmark. Yeah.
And this is where the details get incredibly specific. It really shows how this stuff might be stored, in cellular memory, psychic memory, whatever you want to call it.
So what were the specifics?
Jane, in that past life, was actually a male. And that personality apparently shouted out in the darkness, but nobody was around to help. And crucially, that sound of the railroad they heard in Texas,
Yeah.
it was a subtle auditory reminder, like an echo of a very narrow river named Jan that ran near that Danish forest.
Jan River. Wow.
And Seth even estimates the death, presumably from the wolves, might have happened around 1670, maybe?
1570. So we're talking about a psychic wound almost 3 centuries old, bubbling up during a modern picnic. But wait, how does an echo from 1670 cause a physical reaction now? Is the past personality still feeling it?
That's the critical question, isn't it? And Seth uses the story to lay out a general principle. He says, many intuitions, hunches, and inner disturbances of this sort can be explained in like manner.
Oh, okay.
The past personality isn't actively reeling, not in the way we think of it, but the trauma. It's like an unspent energy complex just sitting there in the subconscious.
Okay, let's unpack this. So a picnic on a windy night in Texas is basically a memory trigger for being, well, potentially eaten by wolves centuries ago in Denmark. That is chilling. But what's the practical advice then? Seth doesn't say just dismiss it, right?
Absolutely not. And this is maybe the most crucial part, the directive. It is always best to heed these inner disturbances, even if the original wound to the psyche, as Seth calls it, happened to a previous personality.
Why? Why listen to this ancient alarm bell?
Because the past isn't just sitting there passively. It's a charged, potentially volatile force.
So it's not just psychological memory. We're talking psychic physics here.
Precisely. The mechanism Seth describes is fascinating. That reminiscent stimulus, the wind, the woods, it doesn't just remind you in a mental way. It charges storms in the subconscious.
Charges storms. Is that okay?
And that charged energy, that subconscious storm, that's dangerous because it can, in turn, initiate fresh instances of unpleasantness in the present life. Meaning, if Jane had ignored that intense warning signal, if she'd tried to just push through it, force herself to relax, that charged energy might have manifested right then and there, maybe as a sudden physical sickness or maybe just overwhelming anxiety that seemed to come from nowhere. It wouldn't be about the wolves anymore, but it would be fueled by that sudden, chaotic psychic release from the wolf trauma.
Wow. Okay, that reframes anxiety completely. It's not necessarily a present-day failure or weakness. It could be a necessary, if really painful, warning system.
Exactly. The subconscious is basically flashing this 300-year-old error message. It's saying, warning, conditions similar to catastrophic event detected. Abort mission.
Abort mission. Get back in the car.
And that's the wisdom, right? The past isn't dead, it's just dormant. Until the right environmental conditions, the right triggers, bring that charged emotional complex roaring back. Psychic health, according to this, requires honoring those deep, sometimes seemingly irrational feelings. Because often they're far more rational than our ego mind assumes. They've got centuries of context behind them.
Okay, heavy stuff right off the bat. So, moving on from that individual historical trauma, the conversation then shifted. It went into this extremely detailed, almost genealogical deep dive into the reincarnation patterns of Joseph's immediate family.
Yeah, this section reads like a cosmic census, doesn't it? It really shows that consciousness seems to orbit, forming these intense, sometimes conflicting groups across lifetimes.
So if Jane's subconscious holds memories of a 1670 trauma, how much more complex are the ties within a close family?
Well, we start with Joseph's brother, Lauren. Seth describes him as having been a woman many times, interestingly, and characterizes him as sensuous. Then we get this incredibly detailed backstory for the other brother, Richard, or Dick.
The details on Dick's last life, they're specific enough to almost sound like historical records. Died last time as a small boy in England.
Right. The date given is 1871.
Yep.
And yeah, the source notes a potential earlier reference, confusion, maybe 1671. But 1871 is what's stated clearly here. He was just 9 years old. Died of diphtheria.
Diphtheria, okay. A common tragedy back then.
Very common. But the level of detail Seth provides here is it's astounding and frankly kind of hilarious in its specificity. His name was Richard Grayson, lived in Devonshire, father's name, Throckmorton.
Throckmorton, you can't make that up.
Right. But listen to the address detail. He died in the front upstairs bedroom of the third house before the end of a dead-end lane.
The third house before the dead end. What does that level of detail imply about how consciousness, or the entity, records reality? It suggests it's not just storing the big emotional traumas, but the entire physical environment. down to street layouts.
It implies consciousness as an absolute recorder, doesn't it? A flawless observer, almost. It anchors the reality of that specific personality in the tiny details, the minutiae of the physical world.
Wow.
And then there's the detail that just perfectly grounds the whole story. It's grimly ironic, but beautiful in a way. Seth mentions the doctor charged a mere 3 shillings for his final call.
3 shillings. The cost of attending a dying child in 1871, recorded by whatever Seth is. That specific detail just makes the whole description pop, doesn't it? This is a perfect, almost humorous accent on a really tragic story.
It really is. So when Seth connects to the current family, he clarifies that Joseph himself, the questioner, was actually resting during Richard's English life. He wasn't part of that particular family unit back then.
Resting, like between lives.
Presumably, yes. Taking a break from incarnation. However, Joseph's 2 present brothers, Lauren and Richard, the former Richard Grayson, were intertwined with Joseph's own past lives on 2 other occasions, once as friends and once as cousins.
Okay, so that explains the familiarity, the deep bond, maybe even the tensions. Their current roles, brother, son, they're just temporary arrangements for this particular lifetime's drama.
Exactly. And this deep intertwining informs the current psychological tension, Seth points out. He zeroes in on the dynamic between the present father and Lauren, the sensuous brother.
Right, what was that?
The father apparently secretly admires Lauren's apparent easy sociability, his outgoing nature, but the father doesn't realize that Lauren is actually forced to laugh and shout loudly, almost performing sociability, just as the father, Seth says, is forced by his own personality to sit silent and sullen.
Wow. So they're both trapped in these opposing facades.
It's a brilliant piece of psychological insight, really. It shows how both are using different but equally exhausting coping mechanisms to mask their internal struggles. They sort of envy each other's appearance. The father wishes he could be outgoing. Lauren maybe wishes he could just be quiet and comfortable, but both are trapped by the masks dictated by their current personalities and maybe past experiences.
That resonates. But then, the mother's past life. You mentioned that provides a tragic explanation for some deeper family issues.
Indeed, it ties back to that English family in 1871, the present-day mother. She was the very jealous older sister in Richard Grayson's English family.
The jealous older sister.
Okay. Apparently, this sister eventually married one of their French relatives and moved to France. Had many children there, Seth adds, almost as an aside.
But her life didn't end peacefully in France.
No. Tragically, her life took a sudden, violent turn. She died by drowning in a flood. And Seth specifies it was in another country, not France. He states clearly that her fear and panic weighed her down.
Drowned in a flood. That's heavy. And this leads to a connection between past life exhaustion and present-day feelings.
Yes, this is where it gets really insightful about present-day psychology. It raises this important question about how deep-seated, maybe chronic past exhaustion can manifest now, as maybe present-day ambivalence or detachment. Seth explains that many women of her generation, meaning in past lives, were so utterly wearied by constant drudgery, often having huge families in really difficult conditions, that they subconsciously develop this deep desire for no children or responsibilities in a future life, like this one.
So even after consciously choosing on some level to incarnate into a new family structure, that spiritual exhaustion, that soul weariness, it just lingers.
Exactly. Seth says she felt subconsciously cheated when children were born in this current life. Her present life's ambivalence, maybe towards motherhood specifically, or perhaps a general exhaustion or emotional detachment. It could be a direct echo of intense physical and emotional labor from previous centuries.
Wow. That provides such a profound and actually non-judgmental context for understanding why people feel what they feel sometimes. It's not always about this life's circumstances. Sometimes the reason is simply, 3 lifetimes of hard work still weighing on the soul.
Precisely. It's a powerful lens for compassion, I think.
Okay, so we've established the subconscious holds these charged memories, these trauma echoes like the wolves, and it manages these complex family orbits, like the Devonshire crew. Now, we shift gears completely, not just memory, but the power of creation.
Yes. And before we get to the main event, the ice cream story, Seth briefly touched upon a previous question they'd ask about some images Joseph and Jane had projected at York Beach.
Right, what was that about?
Well, that precedent is vital because it establishes that large-scale projection is possible, especially under stress or strong emotion. Seth confirmed those York Beach images represented a kind of culmination of a negative trend, maybe a shared fear they both had.
And if they'd accepted those images, if they'd bought into them,
Seth said they would have essentially created an exact replica of themselves. a fully formed physical manifestation, like a doppelganger based on fear.
Whoa! But wait, even in that replication, there's that inherent creativity Seth mentions, right?
Yes, that's the fascinating twist. Seth noted that the inherent creativity of the communicators, Jane and Joseph, would have actually softened the faces to an amazing degree. So the fear projections would still be recognizable as them, but observably changed, softened. It suggests that consciousness, even when manifesting fear, has this underlying tendency towards, well, softening, maybe improvement.
Right.
Or at least change.
Interesting. Okay, but the real anchor story here, the one that just sticks in your mind, is Joseph's childhood experience. The ice cream encounter, as you called it. This demonstrates not a negative trend, but the power of simple, pure, maybe slightly complicated childish desire.
Exactly. This is where it gets really interesting. As you said, Joseph was about 11 years old. He's sitting alone on a bench in a small park, eating ice cream in a cone.
The details are so vivid. Late summer, early fall, near 5 p.m. on September 17th. He even remembers it was a school-free day, and he just visited his father's machine shop. It paints such a perfect picture, that kind of post-industrial childhood boredom and freedom.
Totally. He's alone, probably feeling that specific flavor of 11-year-old melancholy, maybe a bit lonely. And then the stranger appeared.
The boy with the jacks.
A boy with jacks in his hands, seemingly just walking up from a path that wound around a bandstand nearby. They made eye contact. They were literally about to speak. The stage was set for, a potential new friend.
But, as often happens in these weird encounters, the moment just broke.
Right. A squirrel ran up a nearby tree, a totally mundane event. Joseph turned instinctively to point it out to the new boy, an act of sharing, of connection. But when he turned back,
Gone?
the boy was gone, vanished. Joseph looked around. There was nowhere the boy could have run or hidden that fast. In that single instant, poof.
And the clincher. The detail that makes this more than just a weird memory or maybe a daydream.
The crucial witness detail, yes. Joseph's brother, Lauren, happened to be looking out of their father's shop window at that exact same moment, and Lauren saw nothing on the walk where the boy had been standing just seconds before.
So the manifestation was only visible to Joseph.
Only to Joseph.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe just plain weird. I literally wished a friend into existence because I was bored and a little jealous. That's what Seth revealed, right?
That's exactly it. The boy was, quote, a personality fragment of your own. A materialized wish born out of pure emotion and boredom.
A personality fragment.
Yeah. The cause was incredibly simple, almost mundane, and purely emotional. Joseph was wishing he had a friend to play with, and maybe more importantly, he was feeling jealous because his brother Lauren was getting to stay so long with their father at the shop, monopolizing the attention.
Ah, the jealousy factor.
That potent mixture, the desire for companionship, the pang of jealousy, the focused boredom, maybe even the sugar rush from the ice cream, who knows?
Yeah.
It enabled his subconscious to temporarily materialize a personality fragment as playmate.
Wow. A temporary accidental ghost. Born of boredom, ice cream, and a potent wish. It's astonishing that such a, relatively benign set of emotions, jealousy over ice cream and dad time, could produce such a profound physical manifestation.
It really is.
So, if the mechanism for this positive desired fragment, the playmate, is jealousy and desire, how does that compare back to the negative feared projection that caused the anxiety in the woods with the wolves?
Well, that's the key synthesis, isn't it? Both the wolf panic and the boy with the jacks are driven by subconscious energy. It's the same underlying power source.
Okay.
Trauma charges the energy in the first case, the wolves. Desire, mixed with jealousy, charges it in the second, the boy. The mechanism is the same. The subconscious uses the raw, creative power it holds to essentially imitate or project into physical reality.
But the intent or the originating emotion is different.
Exactly. The wolf's memory charges a storm that threatens the current ego, setting off alarms. The boy with the jacks, that energy attempts to fulfill a desire for the current ego. It momentarily overrides the normal physical rules of the plane to create a companion. Same power, different application based on the emotional fuel.
Okay. That makes sense. Same engine, different destinations.
You put it that way. Which leads us neatly into the next big idea from this session.
Right. The limits, the
Wow.
power. Why isn't this happening all the time?
Precisely. This phenomenon, the ice cream boy, it forces us to really confront the limits placed on our innate psychic power while we're operating here, on the earthly plane. Seth states it pretty clearly. Subconsciously, there is no limit, really, to what mind can accomplish.
Which sounds amazing. Limitless creation. But yeah, if we have this power, why aren't we all constantly manifesting things, achieving goals instantly, or frankly, just walking around in complete chaos?
That's the paradox. The constraint is the earthly plane itself, this framework reality we agree upon. On this plane, Seth says, one must work within certain limits. Man simply cannot use all his abilities on the earthly plane indiscriminately.
Okay, why not?
Think about it. If every fleeting fear actually materialized into a wolf in your backyard, or every passing desire for a parking spot materialized the spot instantly, maybe crashing into another car, the consensus reality, the physical laws we rely on, they would just dissolve. It would be unworkable chaos.
So the laws of physics are less like immutable rules and more like necessary guardrails. Guardrails for the ego to keep things somewhat stable.
That's a great way to put it. They're the stabilizing mechanism. But the exception to that rule, as we saw with the ice cream boy, is the occasional spontaneous image production. Especially, Seth notes, in childhood.
Ah, childhood.
Yeah. Occasionally, a personality will astound itself with something like this. This power, this ability, it typically vanishes or goes deep underground by adulthood. Why? Because the ego structure gets much more firmly established, more rigid in its boundaries. But Seth says such occurrences are actually frequent in childhood.
Okay, this gives us a new, maybe deeper way to understand childhood fears, too. We've all heard about the boogeyman concept, right? Kids crying about something they swear they saw lurking in their bedroom.
Exactly. What they might have seen, according to this framework, is a fibrous projection, an image production formed by their own vivid desire or fear, projected outward by their subconscious.
Fibrous projection, like not quite solid, but definitely there.
Yeah, a temporary pseudo-reality created from the raw stuff of thought and emotion. Seth makes it clear these powers, these abilities to project realities, they're meant to be suspended, more or less, during our time on the earth plane. They are latent. They're waiting for a time, perhaps between lives or in other dimensions of reality, when the ego structure isn't so fragile, so focused on just maintaining baseline physical survival and identity.
Okay, so let's connect this individual power, this projection ability, back to the bigger picture, the entity. You mentioned that earlier.
Right. The entity, the larger consciousness, the oversoul, you might say, of which we are all a part, that is what creates the various personalities. We, as personalities, are essentially projections or fragments from the entity itself.
So the entity projects us.
Yes. But what's fascinating here is the distinction Seth makes between how the entity creates and how our individual subconscious sometimes imitates that creation.
Okay, what's the difference?
The entity projects personalities consciously and with purpose. There's a plan, a reason, a learning objective for that incarnation. The subconscious, on the other hand, while it's linked directly to the entity's raw power source, often just attempts to imitate these creation powers, but it does so without that defined conscious purpose.
Leading to accidental stuff,
Yeah.
like the boy with the jacks.
Exactly. Fleeting manifestations, emotional overflows, things born of immediate need or fear, rather than the entity's grander design. The subconscious is like an apprentice wizard who knows some powerful spells but doesn't fully grasp the consequences or the why.
Okay, that helps explain the necessity of fragmentation then.
Right.
Why can't we, the personalities, just tap into the entire power and knowledge of our entity? Why doesn't the entity just, dump all its wisdom into our current brains?
Because of what Seth calls the weight of the whole. Simply put, the consciousness of a part of the whole, meaning us, our current personality, could not bear the weight of the consciousness of the whole.
Too much information. Too much power.
Both. Imagine trying to hold the entire internet, past, present, and future, all its data, all its connections inside your head simultaneously, or trying to hold the energy of a star in your hands. The personality, the ego structure would just shatter.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
So these fragment personalities, us, we do contain the seeds of the whole, meaning the latent power, the connection. It's there. But these powers must remain largely submerged, latent.
And this brings us to the ultimate, maybe underappreciated job of the ego.
Right. In each life, the new consciousness, the ego, its primary struggle, its main job is to tie the present personality together, to create a coherent sense of I in this specific time and place. It uses only what's necessary from the vast subconscious reserves.
And actively keeps submerged any knowledge, any power, any memory.
That would threaten the dominancy of the present ego. The ego is basically fighting this constant, probably exhausting battle to keep us focused on this life, this reality, this set of rules. Otherwise, we could become so overwhelmed by the past, like Jane's wolves, or the future, or just the sheer magnitude of our own larger being, that we'd cease to function effectively in physical terms. The ego is a necessary, albeit often restrictive, mental construct for navigating this particular reality.
Wow. Okay. A cosmic gatekeeper, in a way.
In a way, yes, a very important one.
All right. So before we wrap up, Session 10 also gives us this rare, almost technical glimpse behind the curtain. At the physical mechanics of Jane's channeling process itself, it sounds like it had become quite exhausting by this point.
Oh, definitely. It really humanizes the whole process, doesn't it? And highlights the immense energy cost involved in doing this kind of work.
So what were the details?
Well, by session 10, they were clearly experimenting, trying to find the most efficient way to get the information down. They'd started the session using the Ouija board, the old familiar method. But Jane quickly moved to direct dictation. The answers were just coming through her verbally before the board could even spell them out.
Faster than the planchette could move.
Exactly. But she noted very clearly that receiving the material direct like that was much more exhausting than using the board as a buffer or a focus.
Interesting. So faster, but harder on her system.
Yeah.
And we even get a sense of Seth's own attitude towards the mechanics.
Yeah, this part's great. Jane was aware of a feeling of impatience on Seth's part because the board was just much too slow a medium to use at times.
Huh. That's a wonderful image. A higher intelligence getting frustrated by the, analog speed of the physical world. It makes Seth feel less like this abstract, disembodied force and more like a witty, quick-minded tutor just annoyed by a sluggish device.
Doesn't it? And that impatience, that feeling of speed, it underscores the pressure of the information transfer. But the exhaustion was the critical factor they discussed. Seth stated directly they really need 3 nights between sessions. He noted that this sort of psychic maneuver, translating this information, uses up a lot of energy reserves.
So Joseph asked if there was an easier way, a less tiring method.
He did, and the answer was pretty direct and conclusive. No, she needs time to recuperate.
Full stop. So it emphasizes that while the knowledge itself might flow effortlessly from, the entity plane or wherever Seth is, the actual translation into physical language, sound, the structure of our world, that's metabolically demanding. It's not just mental energy. It's a deep physical drain on the organism doing the channeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder, I think, that every deep dive like this, every piece of insight we get from sources like these, it comes at a cost of real physical energy on the part of the medium, the channel.
Absolutely. So the session concluded, it sounds like, on a very human and warm note.
Yeah.
Given that it was December 20th.
Yeah, they discussed holiday plans, Christmas being just around the corner, and Seth even threw in this humorous little lament, "Too bad I can't be with you for Christmas."
Nice touch. And then the very specific final instruction. The cliffhanger.
Ah, yes. The perfect reminder that the exploration is never truly finished. Seth says, "Good night, dear friends. Don't forget your dream, Joseph."
Don't forget your dream. What did that refer to?
Apparently, it referred to a really vivid, colorful dream Joseph had had a couple of nights before, on December 18th. A dream they had completely forgotten to ask about during the entire session.
Even after an hour of intensely probing the subconscious, past lives, manifestations, there's always more. A completely fresh, unexamined piece of data. A vivid, colorful dream just waiting in the wings.
It's the perfect final flourish, isn't it? It's a reminder that no matter how deep you dive, you probably never empty the well of consciousness. There's always another layer, another message.
Okay, so building on that idea,
Yeah.
the idea of the subconscious creating realities from wolves to playmates, we have to leave you, the listener, with this final thought to chew on.
If the subconscious, acting almost inadvertently, driven by simple jealousy over an ice cream cone, can materialize a personality fragment, what conscious power might be lying dormant in your focused, directed wishes and intentions?
Right. How much knowledge, how much creative capability is your own ego maybe actively suppressing, keeping submerged, just to maintain the comfortable, maybe slightly boring third house before the dead-end status quo of your current life?
That is the ultimate question this session leaves hanging, I think.
Yeah.
What are you capable of that you're not letting yourself access?
What an incredible journey that session was. Seriously. We went from a chilling encounter with, the memory of wolves in 1670s Denmark, to the specific name, location, and even the 3 shilling cost of diphtheria in 19th century Devonshire.
Forgettable detail.
And ended with the spontaneous, almost magical manifestation of the boy with the jacks in a park. Wow.
It really demonstrates the incredible interconnectedness of consciousness, doesn't it? Across time, space, family units. And it reminds us that those fleeting feelings, those seemingly irrational anxieties or sudden bursts of inspiration, they might carry centuries of context. And maybe a lot of power.
Absolutely. So thank you, as always, for sharing this source material with us for this deep dive. If this discussion has sparked your curiosity, and honestly, how could it not? We really do strongly encourage you to study the Seth material books for yourself.
Definitely. And visit the publisher, the New Awareness Network. You can explore these early sessions we discussed today and so much more at https.sethcenter.com/early sessions.
We really appreciate you joining us for this expedition into the deep structure of the self.
We look forward to exploring the next set of fascinating sources with you.
Until next time.